long does it take to recover from an eating disorder? And is a full and lasting eating disorder recovery actually possible? We're going to dig into 5 things that can really influence the duration and intensity of your treatment process. My name is Sheena, and I'm a registered dietitian that specializes in the care of persons with eating disorders. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely click that subscribe button. If the first thing that can influence your recovery journey is how long have you had your eating disorder? The duration of time in which you had your eating disorder is going to influence how long it takes to recover from that eating disorder. So, for example, if you have had your eating disorder for 20, 30 plus years, it may take a longer duration to recover from that eating disorder somebody who has only had their eating disorder behaviors for 6 to 12 months. And that makes a lot of sense because if you have spent 20 to 30 years developing your lifestyle around the behaviors that dictate your eating disorders, your body changes, etc., and you have evolved with a body that has been ridden with an eating disorder, physiologically and psychologically, we're going to need a lot more tools to recover from that eating disorder, as well as a lot more practice to recover from that eating disorder and practice new behaviors in place of those disordered behaviors than somebody who just started their eating disorder behaviors. We always encourage the earliest intervention possible when it comes to an eating disorder. If a teenager is experiencing an eating disorder and we hit the treatment process very heavily, very intensely during those early stages of eating disorder, they may be able to have a much faster recovery and eliminate those eating disorder behaviors with less psychological and emotional turmoil than if it has been long lived. The second thing that's really going to influence your eating disorder recovery process is how much support do you have at home. If anybody that is a teenager, it might be a lot easier to get support, say during meals or challenging those eating disorder thoughts, because the person is living with a family member or a caregiver. The family member or a caregiver may be able to prepare all meals, which can be a huge asset when recovering from an eating disorder. Adults may have these resources as well, such as a spouse or adult children, but it is less likely, which may lead to additional challenges when recovering from an eating disorder. The more support we have, generally, the faster the recovery journey can be, because that person is constantly in the midst challenging those eating disorder thoughts with us so that they're not allowed to just fester in the mind. Providing meal support can also be a huge asset in recovery because we don't have to make those choices on our own, which can be really, really hard with disordered rules and regulations on board. Prolong the length of time it takes to recover from an eating disorder. That can influence the duration of time it takes to recover is resources. So does the person have a medical provider, a dietitian, and a therapist that are specialized in eating disorders on board? Having all of these components can unfortunately be a huge financial burden for many individuals, which can influence their access to proper treatment from that eating disorder and can unfortunately have an influence on how long it's going to take to recover from that eating disorder. Now, I do want to note that a full and lasting recovery is possible for anyone, but having these tools can just make it a little bit easier. Does the individual have insurance? If an individual has insurance, then they are more likely to be able to not only have these providers on board, but have access to things like higher level of care, including residential centers or partial hospitalization programs. Tools like residential centers and partial hospitalization programs can really speed up that recovery process because we're challenging those eating disorder thoughts and behaviors every single step of the day, every waking hour. And we're also around huge support systems, including peers, struggling with some of these same things. So the fourth thing that can really influence how long it takes to recover from an eating disorder is the intensity of your eating disorder behaviors. So how frequently are these things happening? If you are somebody that is using purging through vomiting or exercise, how often is it happening? Is it daily? Is it multiple times a day? If you're somebody that's using laxatives, same thing. Intensity and frequency of these behaviors, the likelihood is it may take a little bit more time to challenge these very intense behaviors in recovery. Logical nature is to practice what we practice. And if we're practicing certain eating disorder behaviors more frequently, unfortunately, these habits are oftentimes just going to take a little bit more rigorous and prolonged time to help us replace these behaviors with a healthier alternative. Fifth thing that is similar to a lot of these other variables, but is worthy of noting on its own, is your environment. So, who are the individuals that are surrounding you? If there's other individuals within the home that are suffering from an eating disorder or deeply steeped in diet culture, it may be a prolonged journey to full and lasting recovery. And the reason why is we're just constantly bombarded with the eating disorder messages that keep those eating disorder behaviors alive. Now, many individuals do have still a long and lasting recovery, regardless of who is around them, but there are going to need to be different tools in place if you're around other individuals that are struggling. Other parameters include access to food. So, can you afford food? Access to safe housing, etc. All these things are going to influence the rate of recovery. And I want to finish this off with noting that a full and lasting recovery is possible for everyone, but it might look different for everyone. Now, thinking of your recovery like a linear line where we start to finish, I want you to instead consider your recovery journey like a puzzle. Each tool that you gain and each resource that you have is like putting one more piece of the puzzle together. Now, that doesn't mean that this puzzle isn't going to get shaken up from time to time. And some of these triggers and turmoil during your recovery process are actually just part of the recovery process. Recovers in a bubble, which means that we can't get rid of triggers in recovery. But the more that we are able to build tools in to help us fight against some of those triggers and those external variables, the better equipped we're going to be for a long and lasting recovery. Now, depending on how long a person has been in an eating disorder or how intense their behaviors, their might look like continuing to follow a meal plan lifelong, while another individual may experience intuitive eating and be able to naturally navigate their hunger and fullness cues. There's absolutely no wrong way to recover, and a qualified healthcare team can really help you to navigate what is the best option for you. By the way, if you want completely uncensored, raw eating disorder information from me, definitely check out my website at peaceandnutrition.com. It is the only space on the internet where I am not heavily censored and I am able to talk about these eating disorder behaviors more freely than I am on social media, which basically blocks any content related to eating disorders. So I have to be really careful what I say on here. If you found this information helpful, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with a friend.